The ceremonial hall of Eternity's crown felt like it had been designed by someone who loved two things: impressing visiting diplomats and confusing them. The ceiling shifted constellations every few minutes, as if the palace were politely announcing, "The political mood has changed again. Please adjust your expectations accordingly." Owen Chase tried not to stare, but every time the stars rearranged themselves, he jumped a little, which likely convinced everyone nearby that humans were naturally skittish creatures. That wasn't helping his image. He already looked like someone playing dress-up in formal attire borrowed from an older cousin. He had arrived early, but apparently so had everyone else in the galaxy, judging from the endless rows of nobles, ministers, and delegates who had instantly filled every chair like territorial birds choosing branches. Owen edged through the crowd, trying to find even one empty seat, preferably one that didn't glow ominously or broadcast its historical significance. Every time he spotted a chair and moved toward it, some shimmering barrier flickered into existence, preventing him from sitting. Diplomatic seating spells. Great for protocol, terrible for people who just wanted to rest their legs. The palace staff said they existed to maintain the proper flow of political energy, which was a poetic way of saying, sit in the wrong place and you'll cause an interstellar scandal. He tried to act casual while scanning for somewhere, anywhere to sit. His movements, however, probably resembled a malfunctioning surveillance drone rotating in place. Delegates whispered as he passed, their long sleeves brushing the floor, their gemstone badges gleaming with family crests that probably had entire tragic epics attached. Owen caught snippets of conversation, none of which helped his confidence. Something about the human representative wandering without supervision. Something about poor thing. Something about bless his misguided bravery. He pretended not to hear any of it. He found an open chair near the high table and hesitated. It was suspiciously empty, like the galaxy had collectively decided this seat came with free misfortune. Still, his feet were killing him, and the shifting star ceilings weren't helping his balance. He took a step toward the chair, just one, and before he could decide whether sitting there was worth the risk, someone grabbed his wrist with the firm, undeniable grip of authority, wrapped in elegance. He turned and found himself staring into the striking face of Princess Selenia. Her blue skin glowed faintly under the hall's gold-tinted lights, and her long golden hair cascaded down her shoulders like strands of sunlight braided into silk. Her ears, long, tapering, beautiful in a way Owen wasn't prepared for, angled slightly as if reading the emotions of the entire room. She locked eyes with him with the intensity of someone who had already decided his fate and now needed him to catch up. Without releasing his wrist, she inclined her head toward the empty seat beside her. "Sit beside me," she commanded softly, but with the unmistakable tone of a person very accustomed to obedience. Owen's brain short-circuited, first because she was stunning enough to make time feel like it tripped over its own shoelaces. Second, because half the hall had turned to watch. Third, because she looked like the kind of royal who could order a fleet to fire with the same calm expression she was currently using to instruct him to sit. He lowered himself into the chair mostly because she was still holding his wrist, though he told himself it was because he was being diplomatic. The hall went silent for a moment, an entire galaxy's worth of judgment packed into the span of 5 seconds. Nobles exchanged glances that suggested Owen had just signed up for something dramatic, political, and possibly illegal. Owen offered a weak smile to no one in particular, the kind that said, "Hello, yes, I am fully aware I may have just ruined my career. Please remain calm." Princess Selenia finally released his wrist and folded her hands neatly, her long ears twitching slightly as murmurs spread. "You attract attention efficiently," she murmured without looking at him. "I think I attract accidents," Owen whispered back. "Attention is just a side effect." She let out a tiny breath that might have been a suppressed laugh, or perhaps a sigh of disbelief. If nobles hadn't been staring, Owen would have asked, but it seemed unwise to draw more attention. The high table shimmered with crystalline data displays and translucent menus that outclassed anything humanity had invented by several centuries. Selenia adjusted one with a graceful motion, and Owen tried not to flinch when the display immediately projected 10 languages at once. His translation implant scrambled to keep up, probably filing an official complaint with his nervous system. "You didn't hesitate," Selenia said quietly after a moment. "Most people do." "I thought hesitating might offend the chair," Owen whispered, then immediately regretted it. But to his surprise, she smiled. A real one, not a royal courtesy smile. Her ears lifted slightly at the edges, softening her entire expression. "I chose correctly," she said. "Chose what?" he asked, because apparently he was determined to dig himself deeper. "A human." That didn't help his confusion at all, But before he could ask what she meant, the hall lights dimmed to signal the start of the summit, and the floor beneath them vibrated as ancient mechanisms awakened. Owen swallowed hard as the palace itself seemed to inhale, preparing to speak. He had no idea what he had just stepped into, but judging from the looks he was getting, everyone else did, and none of them thought he would survive it. Owen had never been this aware of people staring at him before. Normally, humans were the ones gawking at aliens, not the center of attention in a hall full of dignitaries who could probably declare a small war with the flick of a sleeve. Yet here he was, sitting beside Princess Selenia as if he belonged there, while nobles reacted with the same horror one might have when witnessing a diplomatic catastrophe unfold in slow motion. Across the table, a noblewoman subtly covered her mouth with her fan, though the fan was transparent, defeating the purpose entirely. Another delegate leaned toward his companion and whispered something that made both of them nod solemnly, as if Owen had personally insulted their ancestors. He pretended not to notice, a skill he had mastered after attending far too many interspecies briefings where humans were considered endearingly primitive. Princess Selenia didn't seem bothered. She sat straight-backed, regal, and absolutely calm, as if dragging a confused human into political danger was simply part of her daily routine. Her long ears shifted slightly with each new burst of whispering from the crowd, and Owen wondered if they were picking up commentary like biological antennae. The idea made him nervous. His own ears were useless, practically decorative in comparison. "You are fortunate," she murmured without looking at him. "They are only whispering this time." "Only," Owen said. "Should I be worried about level 2, which I assume involves pointing and dramatic fainting?" She angled her head in a way that suggested she was pretending not to smile. "Level 2 involves an inquiry committee and several awkward lunches." "Level 3? "Level 3 involves someone writing a poem about the incident," she said, voice grave. "A very dramatic poem." Owen winced. "Nobody deserves that." The princess allowed a small breath of amusement. The whispering around them didn't stop, but it softened, like people were recalibrating their outrage to a quieter frequency. The summit's first session had begun, and the hall now shimmered with floating displays, holographic diagrams of trade routes, and rotating symbols representing alliances. Owen tried to focus, but half the languages displayed looked like someone had spilled ink across the projection. Selenia gestured toward one of the diagrams with a graceful flick of her wrist, her bracelets chiming softly. "This is the vote rotation schedule. The upper houses will attempt to delay proceedings, claiming they need clarity. They will not need clarity. They simply enjoy delaying things." "Some political traditions are universal," Owen said. "My homeworld has entire committees dedicated to the art of doing nothing." "I studied human bureaucracy," she said thoughtfully. "I found it strangely comforting." "That's the nicest insult anyone has ever given my species," Owen muttered, and she actually laughed, quietly but enough for a nearby noble to snap his head around in scandalized disbelief. Her laughter faded, and her expression shifted to something more serious. She lifted her chin slightly, exposing the faintly glowing spiral mark etched onto the skin just below her collarbone. The sigil of dissolution. Owen had read about it in briefing documents, but seeing it in person startled him. It wasn't a tattoo. It shimmered like living starlight trapped beneath her skin. "Is that why they're avoiding you?" he asked before he could stop himself. Her golden eyes flicked toward him, unreadable. "They avoid what they fear to be cursed. They avoid what reminds them of their own fragility. They avoid me because it is easy." "I'm not avoiding you," Owen said. "You sat because I pulled you," she replied matter-of-factly. "It is different." "Well," Owen said, lowering his voice, "I might have sat on my own. Eventually. Probably. Maybe. Unless the chair bit me." A small smile tugged at her lips. "You are strange for a diplomat." "Thank you," he said, unsure whether he had been complimented or diagnosed. Throughout the session, Selenia occasionally leaned toward him and whispered dry commentary. Never enough to draw attention, yet enough to make Owen struggle to keep a straight face. When one delegate began a speech so dramatic it required 2 holographic backdrops, she murmured, "He practices in front of a mirror," and Owen nearly choked on his drink. When another delegate insisted on replaying a historical treaty 4 times, she whispered, "He does not trust his memory. He also does not trust anyone else's memory." And Owen had to pretend he was coughing to hide his laughter. But not every whisper was humorous. Some were warnings. "They are watching you," she murmured once. "Not out of interest, out of calculation." Owen stiffened. "Should I be worried?" "Only if you plan to do something foolish," she said calmly. Then after a beat, "I have the feeling you might." That feels like a very targeted observation. It is, she replied without apology. As the session ended, delegates began to rise from their chairs, forming clusters that looked deceptively polite but carried the tension of unspoken strategies. Owen stood too, grateful to stretch his legs. Before he could say anything, Selenia stepped closer, her long ears tilting in a way that suggested she was listening to things he couldn't hear. "They assumed you did not know who I was," she said quietly, "but you did not hesitate." "I don't let politics dictate who I sit with," Owen said. "I also don't enjoy standing for an hour while chairs teleport away from me." "That," she said, "is precisely why I chose you." "Chose me for what?" he whispered. She gave him a long, assessing look, one that held the weight of someone who had made a decision long before he arrived. For something only a human would attempt. Owen opened his mouth to ask what that meant, but the hall lights dimmed again, calling them to the next session. Delegates moved like a tide around them, avoiding Selenia as if she carried a contagious misfortune. Owen stayed beside her anyway, and several nobles looked horrified enough that he wondered if he'd just achieved level 2 scandal status. The second day of the summit began with Owen discovering that Eternity's crown had a sense of humor. His room lights activated in a gentle sunrise glow, accompanied by a melodic chime that was supposed to soothe the mind. Instead, it startled him so badly that he tripped over his own boots and saluted an empty corner before remembering he wasn't on duty. He muttered something about the palace having aggressive hospitality while getting dressed, straightening the same formal jacket that had already lost its will to maintain dignity. The corridors leading to the council chamber curved in elegant spirals, illuminated by soft silver lines that shifted color depending on a passerby's mood. Owen noticed with mild horror that the lights kept turning a suspicious shade of yellow near him, which according to a guide panel he'd skimmed last night meant nervous alertness. Great. The architecture was tattling on him. When he reached the chamber doors, delegates were already flowing inside like rivers of silk, layered fabrics trailing behind them with the grace of creatures that never tripped on anything in their lives. Owen followed at a safe distance, aware that if he stepped on even one royal hem, 50 worlds might declare diplomatic war just out of principle. He entered just in time to see Princess Selenia adjusting her seat at the high table. Her long ears lifted when she noticed him, then relaxed slightly, a gesture he had started recognizing as approval, or at least mild relief that he hadn't spontaneously combusted overnight. He approached cautiously, unsure if she planned to drag him into the seat again or allow him the illusion of choice. She didn't grab him this time. She only tilted her head and said softly, "Your seat is still beside me." "I was afraid it might have exploded out of shame," Owen whispered as he sat. "It considered it," she murmured, "but it decided you were too interesting to abandon." Delegates took their places, and once again the floating displays brightened, casting shifting holograms of trade networks, alliance webs, and historical grievances across the chamber. Owen activated his translation implant, which buzzed with the energy of something deeply resentful of its workload. The first speaker launched into a speech filled with elaborate metaphors involving moons, harvest cycles, and destiny, none of which Owen found particularly clear. He scribbled notes anyway, partly to look busy, and partly because Selenia kept glancing at his notepad with amusement. Midway through the speech, she leaned toward him without warning. "He is lying," she whispered. Owen blinked. "About which part?" "All of it," she replied. "He lies as easily as he breathes. Watch his crest." Selenia nodded toward the tall feathered appendage extending from the back of the speaker's head, a symbol of his species caste. The feathers puffed outward every few sentences like a disgruntled bird. "Does that always happen?" Owen whispered. "Only when he lies." "No," Selenia said. "Sometimes it happens when he is hungry. That's, inconvenient. He finds it terribly embarrassing." Owen nearly snorted. He managed to disguise the sound as a cough, though several delegates glanced his way suspiciously. Selenia pretended to be fascinated by the hologram in front of her. Throughout the session, she fed him a mix of political insight and commentary that made the dense debates strangely bearable. She whispered the true meaning behind diplomatic phrases, pointing out the subtle shifts in tone that indicated when a delegate was stalling, threatening, or trying to look wise while internally panicking. Once, when a minister delivered a solemn speech about unity, she murmured, "He practices that expression in a mirror." Near the end of the morning, a tray of refreshments floated between the tables, carrying crystalline cups filled with shimmering liquid. Owen took one cautiously, sniffed it, and immediately regretted that he had. It smelled like fruit mixed with battery acid. "Is this safe for humans?" he whispered. "Yes," Selenia said, "though it may temporarily alter your taste preferences." Alter how? You might crave mineral-rich soil for a few minutes. Owen set the cup down very gently. Selenia lifted her own with effortless grace and took a small sip, her golden eyes flicking to him in quiet amusement. Coward, she murmured. Practically a survival strategy, he replied. During a brief recess, Selenia stood from her seat, her posture shifting from relaxed to alert in a heartbeat. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Owen followed her gaze and saw a group of nobles watching her with calculating eyes. Their attention didn't linger on her long. They shifted it to him, not with curiosity, with intent. Why are they staring at me like that? Owen whispered. Because they are trying to determine whether you are harmless or dangerously foolish, she said. And which one am I? Her ears tilted in amusement. They have not decided. She started walking toward the balcony and he followed, trying not to look like someone being led toward a dramatic revelation. The balcony overlooked the endless rings of starlight around the palace, their shifting patterns reflected in Selenia's hair. She leaned against the railing, letting the cold glow of the stars wash over her. You handled yourself well, she said at last, even when they whispered. Most of the whispering wasn't about me, Owen said. Some of it was definitely about the ambassador who sneezed so hard his badge fell off. She exhaled faint amusement, but then her expression softened, something quieter behind her eyes. You truly do not treat me differently. Most pretend not to stare. You do stare, but not in the way they do. What way is that? He asked. Like I am a catastrophe waiting to happen, she said. Like my presence is a warning sign. Owen shook his head. I've only thought you were a catastrophe twice. Her eyes widened. Twice? Well, he said, the wrist grabbing, and then the part where half the room silently judged me. But the rest of the time, you're just you. Her long ears angled upward, her expression unreadable for an instant. Then she said quietly, that is why I pulled you toward me. Because I'm bad at reading danger signs? Because, she said, humans choose based on what they see, not what others insist must be true. Owen leaned on the railing beside her, feeling the weight of her words echo into the starlit expanse. Carefully, he said, and you think you gambled correctly? She gave a small, sincere nod. I do. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, calling delegates back for the next session. Selenia turned to leave, her expression composed once more. Owen followed, wondering why several nobles looked uneasy when they saw them return together. Whatever the answer was, he had a feeling he was about to find out. The third evening of the summit descended slowly over Eternity's crown, painting the palace halls in muted blues and golds, as if the building itself were settling into contemplation. Owen walked beside Selenia along one of the high corridors, the polished floor glowing faintly under their feet with each step. He wasn't sure if it was reacting to their presence or simply showing off, the way everything in this palace did. If a doorknob suddenly recited poetry, he wouldn't have been surprised. Selenia led him toward the upper observation balcony, the one reserved for delegates who needed a moment of reflective silence, which Owen privately translated as a place to hide from complicated people. The balcony extended far beyond the palace wall, a crescent of transparent alloy that allowed the stars to feel close enough to touch. Owen stopped just inside the threshold, taken aback for the 100th time by how impossible the view was. The swirling rings of stellar dust, the auroras that drifted across the void, the faint lines of ancient energy trails left by passing fleets. It all looked choreographed. Selenia rested her hands against the railing. Her long ears shifted slightly as she listened to sounds Owen couldn't hear, the hum of the palace engines deep beneath them. The starlight reflected on her blue skin, softening her usual formal composure until she seemed almost unguarded. You humans look at the stars and see possibility, she said quietly. We look at them and see memory. Memory? He asked, stepping beside her. She nodded. We travel often and live long enough to witness cycles repeat. Stars forming, fading, collapsing. Dynasties rising, breaking, dissolving. She paused, touching her fingers to her collarbone, where the sigil shimmered faintly. My family misjudged a cycle, and we fell. Owen studied her quietly. She was always composed, deliberate, carved from the discipline of a royal upbringing. But now, under the soft glow of drifting cosmic light, she looked, if not vulnerable, then open in a way she rarely allowed. What happened? He asked gently. Her golden eyes tracked the drifting auroras. A civil war, a series of miscalculations, an enemy who understood public fear better than we understood public hope. She inhaled slowly. We lost. My brothers were exiled. My mother fled into deep space. I remained because someone had to hold what was left. And they marked you for it, Owen said. Marked, she repeated with a soft, humorless exhale. Yes, a symbolic gesture to remind others that I am dissolved from the line of succession. A reminder to keep their distance. Owen leaned on the railing, trying to imagine what that kind of isolation felt like. But Selenia's tone wasn't bitter. It was analytical, as though she were breaking down a historical lesson. That's a lot, he said quietly. It is simply truth, she replied. Truth is easier to carry than shame. He glanced sideways at her. Still, sounds heavy. She tilted her head toward him. Truth becomes lighter when spoken. You humans say this, yes? We humans mostly say things and then hope they make sense, Owen said. But yes, that sounds like us. A faint smile touched her lips. A silence settled between them. Not awkward, not tense. Just present. The kind of silence where two people weren't hiding behind formality. Then Owen, unable to stop himself, said, So, back there, when you said you gambled on a human, what exactly did you think a human would do? Something inconvenient, she said without hesitation. That tracks, Owen admitted. And honest, she added. That one is more surprising. And direct. Now you're exaggerating. She gave him a genuinely amused look. You sat beside me without asking a single question. You grabbed my wrist. You could have refused. I could not have refused, Owen said. You were very determined. Her laugh was soft but genuine. Several stars might have blinked in surprise. She shifted her gaze back to the void. I watched humans long before you arrived. I observed how you judge actions rather than lineages. How you form alliances based on willingness, not old loyalties. I wondered if that trait extended to your diplomats. And when you hesitated only because the chair looked suspicious. I knew you were exactly the type I needed. Owen covered his face with his hand. Please don't tell anyone that was my reasoning. The chair really did look suspicious. Her long ears lifted with quiet amusement. Your instincts were not entirely wrong. That chair has witnessed centuries of diplomatic catastrophes. You're not helping, he groaned. She let the silence settle again, but this time, her voice softened. You asked earlier why they treat me as if catastrophe follows me. It is because they have forgotten that catastrophe follows everyone. I simply survived mine in public. Owen's chest tightened at that. Without fully thinking, he said, They don't have to forget, and you don't have to face everything alone. Selenia's golden eyes turned toward him, bright with something he couldn't place. Why do you say that? Because you grabbed my wrist, he said, and I'm still here. Her expression shifted, just slightly, enough for him to feel the moment settle between them like gravity. Below, soft chimes echoed through the palace again, calling them back. Selenia looked forward, her posture returning to calm, controlled elegance. The next session begins soon. Owen nodded and stepped back from the railing, but just as they turned to leave, she said quietly, Owen, thank you. He looked at her, surprised. For what? For not moving your hand away when I pulled you toward me? He smiled. Anytime. And though she didn't say another word, her long ears angled upward in a way he had learned to translate as something warm, something almost hopeful. Together they left the balcony, unaware that several nobles who passed them exchanged looks that suggested the political climate had shifted, and none of them knew what the new cycle would bring. By the fifth morning of the summit, Owen had become accustomed to the sensation of being watched. Not the casual, curious sort of watching. No, this was the intense, calculating observation of people trying to determine whether he was an idiot, a threat, or a deeply inconvenient combination of both. Delegates paused mid-conversation as he passed, their ornamental robes shimmering with faint bioluminescent patterns that seemed to flicker in disapproval. Even the palace architecture joined in, the mood-sensing wall panels dimmed slightly when he walked by, as if offering condolences. Selenia, however, seemed unbothered by the entire galaxy's growing suspicion. She strolled beside him with the calm assurance of someone who had survived far worse than gossip. Her long ears twitched occasionally, picking up whispers she never commented on. Owen suspected she filtered them automatically, the way humans tuned out elevator music. As they entered the grand hall, the nobles parted like two magnets repelling each other. Owen stared at the gap forming around them. I don't think this is normal diplomatic behavior, he whispered. It is, Selenia said smoothly, when they wish to avoid being associated with a perceived scandal. Owen blinked. Am I the scandal? You are the newest variable, she corrected. They fear variables. Great. I've always wanted to terrify a room full of powerful aliens before breakfast. Selenia allowed a small, elegant nod that hinted at amusement, but she took her seat with quiet dignity. Owen sat beside her, fully aware of the scandalized gas rippling outward like a social earthquake. A minister 2 rows down jabbed his companion with an elbow so sharp it registered as attempted violence. The session began with a projected hologram displaying new alliance proposals. Even though Owen tried his best to follow along, he quickly realized half the noble houses were less interested in the presentation and more interested in staring at him. The other half pretended not to stare, which was somehow worse. Selenia leaned toward him. "They believe I have recruited you." "Well," Owen said, "that makes one of us." "They assume I selected you strategically." "Did you?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. He turned sharply toward her. "You did?" "Yes," she repeated calmly. "I needed someone honest, unpredictable, and capable of surviving political embarrassment." "That last one feels personal." Selenia's golden eyes flicked toward him. "You are handling it well." "By internally panicking," Owen whispered. "That is a form of resilience." Owen sighed. "If only my academy instructors could hear this conversation." The day's debates intensified quickly. Rumors about Selenia's alleged plans began circulating. Restoration, petitions, alliances that would shift the quadrant's balance. Most of the rumors contradicted each other in creative ways. One noble claimed she was building an army in secret. Another insisted she was seeking monastic peace. A third declared she was attempting both simultaneously, which didn't make sense unless the army meditated between battles. During a recess, Owen found himself cornered near a refreshments panel by 3 delegates from House Valoran, tall, silver-crested figures who wore expressions suggesting they were used to giving orders and equally used to people obeying them instantly. "Human," their spokesperson said, an elder with a crest shaped like an unfurled blade. "We wish to clarify your alignment." "My alignment?" Owen echoed. "What am I, a starship nav system?" "You sit with the dissolved one," the elder said, voice dripping with disdain. "I sit," Owen said, "because she tells me to sit. I'm very obedient like that." The entire group stared, uncertain whether this was sarcasm, incompetence, or a diplomatic technique they had never encountered. "She is marked," another delegate said. "You associate with a symbol of collapse." "Look," Owen said, "I didn't wake up this morning planning to become an interstellar controversy. I just sat in a chair." "A chair," the elder hissed, "can determine the fate of nations." "That explains so many meetings I've been in," Owen muttered. Just as the delegates leaned closer, perhaps to intimidate, perhaps to sniff him, he couldn't tell. Selenia approached. Her presence shifted the mood instantly. Even these confident nobles recoiled slightly, like predators encountering a creature they didn't understand. "Is there an issue?" Selenia asked calmly. The delegates straightened, their postures stiff as if their spines had been replaced with metal rods. "We were simply expressing concern," the elder said. "Your concern," Selenia replied, "is noted and unnecessary." The group retreated, each step radiating disapproval, but none daring to argue with her directly. As they vanished into the crowd, Owen exhaled through his nose. "That was something." "They wish to measure you," Selenia said. "Well, I hope I'm at least average height. I'd hate to disappoint." She gave him a mildly exasperated look. "Not your height, your resolve." "My resolve is entirely situational," Owen said. "It's strongest when I don't know I'm supposed to be resolving anything." "Perhaps that is why it works," she said quietly. They walked together toward the next chamber, where smaller strategy committees were forming. Owen noticed several delegates watching with narrowed eyes, their expressions evaluating, recalculating, revising entire political equations around his presence. He leaned closer. "Is it me, or is the tension getting worse?" "It is." Selenia glanced at him. "Because they suspect I am preparing something." "Are you?" "Yes." "A plan?" "Yes." "A terrifying plan?" "A necessary one." Owen swallowed. "Do I want to know?" She slowed slightly, meeting his gaze with surprising seriousness. "You will know, but not yet. And until then, stay close," she said. Then in a softer voice meant only for him, "I will not have them pulling you apart with questions you are not prepared to answer." He nodded, unable to ignore the warmth her words carried. They stepped into the committee chamber together. The room quieted instantly. Every eye turned toward them, toward her, toward him. Owen felt the shift, subtle yet powerful, the sense that the political storm was building, and he was now fully inside it. Still, he walked beside her. And though she didn't smile, her long ears tipped upward in a way he had learned to recognize. Approval, trust, and perhaps something deeper neither of them had named yet. The sixth evening of the summit carried a strange stillness, as if the entire palace were holding its breath. Owen followed Selenia down a quiet corridor he hadn't seen before, one that sloped gently downward and glowed with a dim violet light. The walls were lined with crystalline panels that pulsed rhythmically, as though the palace itself had a heartbeat. Owen wasn't entirely convinced it didn't. "Where are we going?" he whispered. "To speak without ears listening," Selenia replied. Owen glanced around nervously. "Are the walls alive?" "Not alive," she said. "Merely attentive." "That does not make me feel better." She gave him a faint look of sympathy. "You will adjust. Humans adapt quickly. It is one of your more charming qualities." "Thank you," he said, trying to sound dignified. "I also make excellent sandwiches." She paused mid-step and blinked at him. "Is that a diplomatic skill?" "Only in dire emergencies." The corridor opened into a dim chamber, lit by soft floating spheres of light. A round table occupied the center, surrounded by seats made of woven living fiber that shifted gently, adjusting to their shapes as they sat. Owen grabbed the armrests immediately, just in case the chair decided to wander off. Before he could ask anything, a shimmering figure emerged from the far wall, a hologram with the flickering form of an elderly advisor. Its expression was remarkably smug for something made of photons. "Ah," it said, voice crackling slightly, "the human inconvenience arrives." Owen pointed at the hologram. "You. I've heard about you." "It has heard about me," the hologram said dramatically. "How delightful." "This is my former tutor," Selenia explained. "He oversees my intelligence network." "Overseas," the hologram scoffed. "I am the network, a masterpiece of strategic memory and cultural analysis, reduced now to babysitting organics." "Don't antagonize him," Selenia murmured. "I am not antagonizing," the hologram said. "I am merely observing the human's structural fragility." Owen narrowed his eyes. "You're doing it on purpose." Selenia cleared her throat before the hologram could respond. "We are here because there is something you must understand." The lights dimmed. A projection blossomed above the table. Lines of shifting colors, symbols Owen didn't recognize at first, then gradually began to interpret. Mapping routes, alliances, zones of influence. "You're planning something big," Owen said softly. "Not a restoration," Selenia said. "Not a rebellion. Something new. Something they will not anticipate." "You want to build a new political structure," he said slowly. "One not based on old dynasties." Her ears lifted slightly. "Correct. The houses cling to lineage. But lineage failed my family. It fails many. I intend a coalition based on competence and shared purpose." Owen felt the weight of it then. The danger, the ambition, the hope. "That's going to terrify a lot of people," he said. "It already does," she replied. "I have seen the whispers. They believe I seek my throne. That is nothing compared to what I truly intend." The hologram chimed in. Her new structure would destabilize centuries of aristocratic stagnation. "Personally, I find the idea refreshing." Selenia continued, her tone more serious than he had heard before. "I did not bring you into this lightly. I need someone who is neither tied to their dynasties nor blinded by their politics. Humans choose based on what is happening, not what should have happened generations ago. You think I can help?" "I know you can," she said, "because you do not see me as my sigil, or my exile, or the catastrophe they whisper about." "I see you," Owen said quietly, "as you." Her expression softened. For a moment, the room felt smaller, closer, as if the holograms leaned in to listen. "You also," she added lightly, "make diplomatic disasters seem almost charming." Owen cleared his throat. "Happy to contribute." A soft pulse rippled through the chamber. An alert. The hologram's eyes sharpened. "Delegates from houses Tenebrae and Velerin meet privately in the East Wing," it reported. "Their discussion includes the terms countermeasure, alignment, and the inconvenient human." Owen flinched. "Why am I always an inconvenience?" "Because you exist," the hologram said. Selenia ignored it. "They are accelerating. They fear we are forming an alliance." "We are," Owen said before fully thinking it through. Her eyes widened slightly. "Are we?" "Seems like it," he replied, heart pounding. "Unless you don't want me involved." "I want you involved," she said softly. There was a warmth in her voice he had only heard hints of before. Her long ears angled upward, a sign he now understood as sincerity. Rare, precious, unguarded. The hologram made a static noise that sounded suspiciously like a sigh. "If you two are finished generating emotional turbulence, there are strategic matters." "Not now," Selenia said firmly. The hologram, for the first time, looked speechless. Owen savored the moment. Selenia stepped closer, studying him with an intensity that made his throat tighten slightly. "Owen," she said quietly, "this path is dangerous. Standing with me means facing every house that fears change." "I've been facing them already," he said, mostly with panic smiling. "Yet you remain." "Because you grabbed my wrist," he murmured, and didn't let go. Her breath caught, a small sound, barely audible. Outside the chamber, a tremor of footsteps echoed. Nobles, guards, whispering voices. The palace felt different now, charged, shifting, preparing for the next cycle. Selenia drew a steadying breath. "Everything moves quickly from here." Owen nodded. "Then I'll keep up. And if you fall behind, I'll pretend it was part of the plan." A small, bright laugh escaped her, a sound like starlight breaking. They walked toward the door together as the chamber lights faded behind them. The hologram watched with an expression halfway between confusion and resignation. "I must update several predictive models," it muttered. "Humans ruin everything." Owen grinned. "You're welcome." And as he stepped beside Selenia into the glowing corridor, he felt the shift, the unmistakable beginning of the storm's center forming around them. He was no longer a bystander. He was part of her plan, and she had chosen him. The final morning of the summit began with a hum that resonated through eternity's crown. Subtle, deep, like the low vibration before a starship jumps to light speed. Owen felt it in his chest as he walked beside Selenia toward the Grand Assembly Hall. Delegates moved around them in clusters, their whispers sharper than before, their glances more precise, as though the galaxy had collectively realized that something important would happen today. Maybe they sensed the shift. Maybe they felt the tension building like a gravitational pull. Or maybe, Owen thought, they were all simply dramatic by nature. Selenia walked with quiet purpose, her long ears angled forward. She looked composed, but he sensed the weight she carried. Not fear, anticipation, responsibility, determination. Owen admired her for it, even as he questioned how he had managed to end up in the center of interstellar politics when he had originally been assigned to observe and take notes. Technically, he was still observing, just more loudly. The Grand Assembly Hall opened before them, a vast amphitheater of shimmering floors and towering crystalline arches. Delegates filed into their seats in careful, symbolic patterns. Owen noticed immediately that every seat near Selenia remained empty on both sides, except his. The moment he sat beside her, a ripple of murmurs spread. He pretended not to hear them, adopting the serene expression of someone who had wholeheartedly accepted his role as a scandal. A senior minister stepped forward to begin the agenda, but before he could speak, three noble houses rose at once: Tenebris, Bellerin, and Aurelian. A dramatic entrance, complete with coordinated flares of their house crests. Owen whispered, "Do they rehearse that?" "Yes," Selenia whispered back. "Excessively." The elder of House Tenebris stepped forward, crest feathers stiff. "We raise a formal challenge," he declared. "The princess dissolved seeks to restore her power through manipulation, using an off-worlder as her pawn." Gasps filled the hall. Someone fainted. Someone else helped the fainted person stand so they could gasp properly. Owen stood before he fully thought it through. "I'm not her pawn," he said, louder than intended. His voice echoed off the crystalline walls, which helpfully amplified it even more, because the palace enjoyed drama. "If anything, I'm more of a wildly unqualified consultant." The hall fell into stunned silence. Even Selenia blinked at him. He cleared his throat. "What I mean is, Princess Selenia hasn't manipulated anyone. She's been honest, direct, and surprisingly patient, considering how many of you think chairs hold political power." An offended wave swept through the nobles. Owen continued anyway. "You're afraid she's here to reclaim a throne. She isn't. She told me herself. She wants something new, something better. A coalition built on merit, not lineage. On competence, not pedigree." The ministers exchanged uneasy glances. The hall's crystalline acoustics made their muttered consultations sound like bees debating ethics. House Vellerin's elder narrowed his eyes. "You speak boldly for one who knows so little of our history." "I know enough," Owen said, heart pounding. "I know she didn't give up after her exile. I know she didn't retreat. She observed. She studied. She adapted. Humans have a name for people like that." Selenia watched him intently. Owen finished. "We call them leaders." A low murmur spread, uncertain, shifting, thoughtful. Delegates who had avoided looking at Selenia now regarded her differently, as if recalibrating long-held assumptions. House Aurelian's matriarch stepped forward, regal and severe. Why should we trust her vision? She bears the mark of dissolution. Selenia rose then, slowly with the grace of a star barely beginning to rise. Silence deepened. I bear the mark, she said, voice clear. I do not hide it, but I refuse to be defined by it. I lost my titles. I lost my home, but I did not lose myself, and I will build a future not shackled to the past. Her long ears lifted with strength, her posture regal in a way no sigil could diminish. And I have chosen my first ally, she added, glancing at Owen, a human, because humanity judges the present, not the ancestry, because humanity knows how to build from nothing, and because this one, she hesitated only for a heartbeat, does not see me as broken. Owen felt his throat tighten. The chamber was utterly still. Then the holographic advisor, Selenia's tutor, manifested unexpectedly in the center of the hall. As her strategic archive, it announced, voice magnified, I confirm her analysis is more stable than the projections of these noble houses by a margin of 87%. Nobody asked you, House Tenebris snapped. I do not require permission to be correct, the hologram replied. Several nobles groaned. Owen exhaled a laugh before catching himself. The assembly shifted. Ministers and delegates leaned toward each other, whispering furiously. The atmosphere thickened, then slowly melted. Attitudes changed, not dramatically, not all at once, but like a ship altering course degree by degree. Finally, the presiding minister stepped forward. The council recognizes the princess's proposal for a new coalition. A vote will be held. The vote unfolded in shimmering layers of light. Symbols flashed above each delegate. Owen watched with his heart in his throat. When the final symbol faded, the minister turned. Motion passes. A breath Owen hadn't realized he was holding escaped him. Selenia's ears lifted, and she inhaled sharply, a silent, private exhale of relief. But the hall erupted. Some cheered. Others argued. A few fainted again. Owen leaned toward her. Did we just shift the political trajectory of multiple star systems? Yes, she whispered. Did I help? Yes, she said, and her voice softened in a way that struck him deeply. More than you know. When the assembly finally adjourned, Selenia led him to the balcony once more. The stars were calm again, the void glowing with soft hues. She turned to him, golden eyes warm. You changed my future, she said. You changed mine first. Her long ears tilted upward, a quiet smile tugging at her lips. You were inconvenient, she murmured. I specialize in that. And necessary, he swallowed. So what happens now? Now, she said, stepping closer. We build. She extended her hand, not commanding, not pulling, simply offering. Owen took it. The palace lights shimmered gently above them as if acknowledging the moment. And for the first time since the summit began, Owen felt the future shift in a direction that wasn't frightening, but full of possibility. Together they stood at the edge of the balcony, no longer an exiled princess and a confused junior diplomat, but partners stepping into something entirely new. And somewhere behind them, the hologram muttered, I predicted this. Mostly. Owen laughed. Selenia's hand tightened around his, and the stars watched quietly as a new beginning took shape.